Hello, and welcome back to Practically Political. I am joined as always by Ashley Davis and Kurt Bardella. It's great to have you folks here. Today is November 19th, uh, 2025. I can't believe it. More than 2 weeks past the election. And of course, the big question that is just bouncing around political circles, is this the start of Donald Trump being a lame duck? And you look at things and you have to say, okay, he opposed the Epstein files, but it started with the trickle with Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene, and then it was going to be the dam was about to break. So it's always better if you can't stop the parade, go to the front of it. So he is now saying that he welcomes it, that he'll sign the bill, though I'm a little cynical, so I just want to count my chickens when that happens. But in any case, it's a huge change. His approval ratings are the lowest that they've been since January 6th. And you're starting to see, maybe it's just a hairline fracture, but you're starting to see the first cracks in the MAGA alliance. And just he's ruled the Republican Party for so long, and there's been no dissent. And I have to say, is this the end? Most presidents, they say you have 6 to 9 months in your second term before you start to become a lame duck. It's been going on a year now. I guess technically 10 months that he's been in office, but I would love to hear your thoughts on this, because we've said this is the end of Donald Trump before. We've said, oh, he's not going to survive this. This is going to be it. But yet he always has. But this time, to me, for a few reasons, does seem a little different. What do you think, Ashley?
Well, listen, I think there's always going to be the lame duck question. Even when he got reelected, obviously there was, because of how he got reelected and by the numbers, he had a lot of momentum. But I think he's always going to face that potential of being a lame duck. I think Epstein was a little bit different of a story. I think that was a lot constituent driven. I mean, obviously, by the way, the Republicans started this whole thing with Epstein, with the conspiracy theory and everything else. So, like, we should take full blame for that. I am not a believer that there's some smoking gun about Trump in the Epstein files, because I think they would have come out under Biden or whatever. I actually think it's going to be, well, one, I hope the victims are protected, but also there's going to be a lot of conversation around, I bet you, business leaders. Obviously, Larry Summers took the fall already because of some of his behavior, but I think there's going to be other people like that. I don't think Bill Clinton gets scathed, because, again, I think that would have been out as well. And what do you do to Bill Clinton at this point, right? But I think that the Epstein vote, when you had Marjorie Taylor Greene, but you had other conservatives, Massey, like everyone that kind of votes against stuff, not Marjorie, but Massey, Congressman Massey from Kentucky. But I think constituents believe there was a conspiracy about this that we started again. And so they wanted to know. They want to know not really about Donald Trump, but they want to know about all the other people. Are there other people that are out there? So, in my opinion, I think that we waited way too long to have this vote. Obviously, you saw how quick the Senate vote was right after the House vote. And I think the president's going to sign it. I mean, why not at this point? But there's other lame duck issues that I don't think, I mean, I think he still has a lot of power in our foreign policy. We could talk about that a little bit later. I mean, there was a conflicting, it was so fun to watch yesterday in Washington when you had this big Epstein vote happening on one side of the Pennsylvania Avenue, and then on the other, you had 1,000 entourage from Saudi Arabia. And so just the competing dialogue that was happening, and I'm sure that was all purposely driven. But I'm not ready to say he's completely a lame duck. Maybe on some policy issues, maybe people are more willing to take him on, but I don't think he's quite there yet, but we'll see. I think he's got some time. A little bit
Yeah,
of time, but some
I
time.
mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword because on one hand, as we head into the midterm, Donald Trump is both the biggest asset and the biggest liability for Republicans. Like right now, the generic ballot for Republicans are upside down. They're down. A new poll came out today showing them down 14, the largest gap we've ever had in that poll. And that the majority of the country is dissatisfied with the direction that we're headed in, and Donald Trump is a drag. Like you're going to get this scenario where there are those who are running, especially in the very few swing districts that are left. They're going to be running against Donald Trump. That's going to be really tough for Republicans to create that separation. On the flip side of it, you have to keep Donald Trump at arm's length because he singularly can hijack the entire media cycle by doing whatever he wants. This is someone who has no regard for traditional norms. And so if he decides, you know what, everyone thinks I'm a lame duck, well, I'm going to go do this flex. I'm going to go send the military into a city, and everyone will cover that. His commander in chief authority and that has and the expansion of executive authority that we have seen greenlit by the Supreme Court makes him impossible to ignore if he decides that he wants your attention. And I think that Republicans are going to be in the unenviable position of having to answer for every single thing that Donald Trump does from now until 2028. I think that he will be a tremendous drag on a ticket. We have already seen the conundrum for Republicans that when he is not physically on a ballot, turnout just falls off a cliff. And so the other side of that, though, is the base voters still respond to Donald Trump. The base still very much has a high approval of him. And so you need your base to win elections, but he also repels the very voters you're going to need to win in the middle ground districts. So I think Republicans have a real problem.
Well, and I think, well, a couple of things. Um, Obviously, when he's not on the ballot, that's when he's more of a liability. If you look at the track record of every single election other than 2016, 2020, and 2024, and even 2020, it wasn't a great year for the House, even though they did gain some seats. And what to me will be interesting is when we get past primary season, that how many of these incumbents are going to come out and challenge him because they don't have to worry about being primary, and how many are going to retire, which I think is, one's the micro picture, one is the macro picture. I think more and more will retire, particularly if his numbers continue to go down. And it looks like the Republicans are going to take more and more of a bath in the midterm. I think what they have going for them is that if you look at the number of congressional districts, I heard a stat the other day, I couldn't believe it. In 2000, only 25 years ago, there were 125 considered competitive or swing districts in the House. Now there are literally 13 districts that Biden won, that where there's a Republican, 3 districts that Harris won in that situation. So it's, I don't think you're going to have these, you look back in 2010, Republicans got 63 seats. In 2018, Democrats got over 40. I don't think you're going to see that swing anymore. So, but again, it's so closely uh, divided right now that there's just takes a few votes to swing it. Wouldn't you
Yeah.
agree?
Yeah, well, that's also, one of the big things that's happened this week is, the Texas redistricting has been struck down by, a federal judge. We're seeing other states that maybe thought about doing redistricting, deciding they're not going to pursue that path after all. Um,
Indiana and Kansas for 2 examples.
yeah. And so the Republican advantage that they thought they would have may not. Actually, there's a scenario where it turns out they don't have any gains in redistricting because of some of the things that other Democrat states have done. And it really, at the end of the day, it all could be for nothing. Like all the energy, money, time, oxygen spent on the redistricting wars that Republicans started this time down could be all for naught.
We didn't originally start at air quota.
That's why I said this time down.
Okay, all right. You kind of thought that you kind of threw that in there, but I mean, you're right though. If you have California and Utah with 6 seats, really that are most likely Democrat, so and then we
Virginia now
lose
after the election too.
if they've got still some significant steps to go through, but I think they could get there. But that's 1 or 2. But then if you have Texas go away on the Republican side, then you really have like Florida will probably do it for 1 or 2 seats. I mean, no, it could be it could. This is why I've said from the beginning, I think this whole gerrymandering thing's bad. I say it on both sides of the aisle, just like the shutdown.
Yeah, yeah, it's a mistake. I mean, I think it was a big tactical mistake by Republicans that they started something that they thought they would just run roughshod over, and all it ended up doing was exciting and animating the Democrats to get into the game rather than just being incompetent or complacent. And I'm a big believer tactically in campaigns. I've always said, don't do anything that excites and animates the other side's base. That the benefit that you might have in that immediate second will be washed out by the reaction that comes from the other side tactically. And I think that's a big mistake that Republicans have made this time down. They got too drunk on their own power.
No, I agree. And speaking of the shutdown, I'm curious to see. It's been a while since it ended now, and I still think overall that it was a win for the Dems, and I say that because, but the optics were bad. So what I mean by that is that when you look at what they achieved of making healthcare an issue that the country was focusing on much more, because it's one of the very few issues where the Dems do better in polls consistently. Also, so many Dems I know have been frustrated by the fact that, yes, I know that a lot of Republicans vote on culture, race, religion more than their pocketbooks, but doesn't the fact that Donald Trump's policies are so bad economic view, isn't that at least a factor? And now I think you're starting to see it, because what really came across was he didn't seem to care. He was focusing on the White House and throwing parties at Mar-a-Lago and fighting, going to court to not pay SNAP benefits. And so I think a lot of people are saying, God, is this guy really looking out for me? And then having dinner with the billionaires and all this stuff. So I think they achieved that goal as well. So, and even if the vote fails, which there's a good chance it will, at least people now are aware of it. They got their premium increase notices in early November, and it's going to take effect in January. But again, the optics were terrible because they could have done it more strategically, and it did look like for no reason that they folded. But their argument is, hey, we're the only party that cares. Trump was never going to care, so we had to end it at some time. So we achieved our goals. But what do you think, Kurt?
I think that it's both. I think that when you look at the results of the election from a couple Tuesdays ago, and especially in places like Virginia, where there are a tremendous amount of federal workers, it is very clear that Republicans lost the shutdown narrative in those places based on the results that we saw. Where Democrats, did so well that even the very, very flawed attorney general nominee was like, brought across the goal line by the sheer numbers of Democrat votes that we got. I think that it was bad for Trump across the board, and even Trump saying, he said flat out, undercutting Republican messaging everywhere. We lost the shutdown. That kind of speaks for itself. I think it was a loss for Chuck Schumer. I think it was a huge political loss for just that leadership in general. Both Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries in the last month have taken a huge hit. Their approval, Chuck Schumer's approval rating is like 17% right now. Hakeem Jeffries just drew a primary challenger from, I think it's a New York City council member that's going to be primarying him. And so it was a loss for leadership, but political net benefit for Democrats overall.
Yeah, you know what, Kurt? I just, I mean, listen, I think we've all said this. I think that the shutdown's a loser for everybody because I think it's like a really dumb political move on both sides of the aisle. But what Democrats did do is bring the help. Listen, these subsidies were going the subsidies were going to go up one way or the other, even if they were extended. Just the pure. I just learned this actually the last 10 days of just what was really going to happen, no matter what. What the dialogue did that I think is pretty smart, whether they intended it to do or not. I know they intended it to be talking about healthcare, but what they did is no matter what happens January 30th, which is the new date of the shutdown, no matter what happens at the end of the year, it's going to go back on Republicans because
Yeah,
there's no way these subsidies are going to be extended from Republicans
yeah,
at
I think
this
that's right.
at the same level. Like there's just
Yeah,
there's
there's
no
no
way
way
they
they'd
could get
be
it
able to get it
across.
done. They
No.
legislatively, when you just look at that calendar right now, we're about to hit the Thanksgiving break. They're gone, obviously, for 2 weeks in December and the first week of
Th-
January.
Yeah.
There's just not enough legislative calendar days to get a healthcare deal through committee, through the House, through the Senate. Like, I just don't see it happening.
Well, I was just asking, like, do we kick the can down the road and extend them again? But there's just a lot of fundamental people that believe that there's people on these subsidies that should not be on them anymore. And like, if you believe and ran on waste, fraud, and abuse, and listen, there probably are a lot of people on there but it's really hard to take away a subsidy that's already been given. And we
I was gonna
all know
say, it's
that.
like when you take away a subsidy that's already given, it's called a tax increase. That's how it gets messaged in an election year, which we're going to be heading into. And Donald Trump
I
could
think health.
promise to cut all the $2,000 checks he wants to the American people. By the time they get that check, like it'll be so baked in
Yep.
that
I think it's
everything got more expensive.
I think it's the border issue of 2 year or 18 months ago. I mean,
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
think this
Yeah.
is the
But the
border
border
issue
was to Democrats. This time
yes.
down, healthcare will be to Republicans.
Yes, I think, and we always lose on healthcare.
Yeah,
Yes.
and that was the great.
Except Obamacare in 2010.
True.
Well, but
We did win the House.
but Obama did lose for that because Americans had said, "We want you focusing on the economy." And he said, "No, I want to do healthcare." And so I think the timing was off, and that's one of the reasons that, frankly, the Tea Party exists. George Bush's profligacy was also a reason that for the gestation of the Tea Party. But that election in 2010 was one of the great wallops ever, and I think a lot of it was because people felt that he had messed up, that he had priorities other than what they wanted. But it's interesting because talking about one of the things that going back to this whole uh, possible cracks in MAGA, one of the main complaints when you hear someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene talk about it is what happened to America first. Trump's abandoned. Like, he's spending all this time going to Asia. He's focusing on foreign policy. He's not paying attention to Americans that are in trouble. He's sending $40 billion to Argentina, all this stuff. And so I'd love to get your thoughts on the whole visit he just had with the Saudi crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman, who obviously was infamous for allegedly, and the CIA under Trump backed this up, cutting up a journalist, Khashoggi, and trying to cover it up. And Trump's response was, well, things happen. And what was amazing, I watched a little bit and I thought MBS was actually more contrite about it than Trump was, which is
Well, he's
very,
had to live with it a lot longer.
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on this? Because I think that my main issue is that, and you can debate this, but it seems like a lot of Trump's foreign policy is it's not which leader is democratic or autocratic, but which leader is strong and which leader is weak. And because of that, we don't typically, every president since Truman, really since the Second World War, we've always stood up for our values, for human rights, things like that. It doesn't seem as if we're doing that as much anymore. So, what do you think about the whole thing, Ashley?
Well, I'm a security hawk. So I listen, I think that we have to bring Saudi into our friend group. I mean, and I get it. I was there on 9/11. I know all the stories about us flying the plane back for all the Saudis, after the World Trade Center incident. I know about the reporter, but they're the biggest influence in that region. And if we are going to have any strength against China and Russia, they need to be in our fold. I don't know, and I'm actually surprised there wasn't an Abraham Accord announcement of them coming into the fold there. I thought that was going to be kind of the big announcement. But us being friends with, like, we can't be enemies with Saudi. I mean, it's just not going to be a good thing for us national security wise, economic wise. And so I also think I'm gonna stick up for Obama here. I think Obama, when he was going back to what you said about healthcare, he had a very limited time to get what he believed was a major policy issue that would save the country in regards to how he believed healthcare should work, whether we agree with it or not. So he used that first 12 months, 18 months of his administration before a potential house flipping to get his policy through. You have that very limited amount of time. I would actually say that I think Trump does think that I think there is a grocery problem. I think that there is still a problem with US feeling like they're financially secure. But I think he's trying to deal with these big issues, not because he doesn't love the country, not because he doesn't think it's for national security reasons that he's cutting all these deals. But I don't, it still goes back to people that are voting. I don't know if people in West Virginia or people in Utah care about Saudi Arabia. I understand it. I very
Yeah.
much understand it. I just don't know if they understand it because they're still worrying about how much the groceries cost.
I think it's more an optics issue. The president the other day, speaks at this McDonald's summit, right? Trying to, get everyone to focus on the economy and affordability for a second and to tout all the things he's done that's so great to help the economy. And then the very next day, he's palling around with MBS. And I just think, just from a visual aid standpoint, all we hear are Republicans saying we want the president to get back on the road, do rallies here in America, start hitting the economic message every day. And what does he do? How does he respond to that pressure? He has dinner for a bunch of billionaire businessmen. He, is at the Kennedy Center with this, huge Saudi investment, economic forum going on. And anytime we see footage of the president, he's calling a reporter, piggy. He's being disrespectful and sexist to another reporter who asks him about Epstein. He's, just looking and sounding completely off his rocker, and unstable. And I just think that there are a lot of Americans who are looking around and just thinking to themselves, I don't understand why he can't just do his job. And what happened to all the promises of, as Dave called it, America first. That is, uh, you know, if Marjorie Taylor Greene isn't MAGA enough for MAGA, like, they've gone just full tilt so far. It's like I said, a couple years ago, if someone with the last name Cheney isn't conservative enough for you, like, the conservatism is dead in America. That's crazy talk. Um, and I think Trump is just running all of these, linchpins of what has propped him up over the years just into the ground. And he's creating a situation like we talked about at the top of the show, where Republicans are going to have to start running away from Trump as fast as they can if they hope to electorally survive.
And I would say and we can debate whether this is truly an attempted authoritarian takeover, but putting that aside, the one thing when leaders have succeeded, you look at Turkey, you look at Orban in Hungary, the economy was good. Because if the economy is good, it distracts people from other stuff that you're doing. And just like if the economy is bad, you can be doing a whole bunch of other things well. And as we talked about on the last show, Trump is falling into this Bidenomics trap where he's saying, don't believe your wallet, believe me. Prices are lower, they'll go lower still. And I have to say, just the beautiful irony of hearing for so long about how, no, overall tariffs will lower prices. And then he repeals the tariffs on food to guess what? To lower prices.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's and again, I think for Donald Trump here, I know, I get this. I think Ashley's right. We need to have strategic aligned interests, with Saudi Arabia for a number of reasons. I get that part, but you can also do that while not just completely whitewashing, the murder of a journalist and making
Come
light
on,
of it.
Kurt, our country does that, like, daily to other countries. I mean, like, come on, like, let's not be naive here.
I'm not being naive. I'm being
Yeah,
hypocritical.
you
There's a
are being naive.
difference. No, I'm
Okay, that's
not.
fine. I mean,
Like,
we
I
do
know.
this. This is what we do all the time. I
Yeah,
mean,
the
like,
difference
the
is,
problem
though,
was they got caught.
yeah, it's like the difference is, like, there isn't, like, a well documented report about how we took a bone saw to another journalist in another country, like, and then hosted the person who ordered that in our own Oval Office. Like, that's the difference. This president just, glibly going, oh well, things happen, and we didn't really like that guy, so okay, like like, what does it mean to be an American citizen if that can
Listen,
happen to you?
I
I
get
think
it,
what
but I
struck a
also
raw
think that
nerve, let me just say, I
go
think
ahead.
what struck a raw nerve, and this is similar to Putin when they had the summit, the Alaskan summit in August, is that a lot of these people were considered pariahs to a lot of the world. And having the United States bring you back into their fold is a way of ending that period of being ostracized. Now, I do agree that I think MBS, I don't think he's even 40 years old. He's very young. He's
I
going to
think
be
it's
around
40.
forever.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Saudi is a very important. They are now the center of the Middle East. It's the
Hmm.
Saudi Arabia and the UAE. It's no longer other countries like Israel. And so I think we do have to be with them, and we do have to have a good relationship. But you can still have a good relationship while being firm and sticking up for your values.
But
And
how many
that's
more times does our country need to say that it's wrong to kill our I mean, like, what else do we do? It's been 10 years. Like, do we still
no, I
continue to live
agree.
in
But I'm
that?
just saying there's a difference between standing up for your values and having a good relationship and acquiescing, which is what he's done. And the same thing, it went back to Helsinki. Remember, well, Putin told me that he wasn't the one. So
But
irrespective of
how embarrassing was it when Joe Biden fist bumped him afterwards? Like,
oh,
that to me is an
stupid.
embarrassment for our country.
I agree. Biden totally blew it. And we paid the price when they not only wouldn't increase oil production, but they cut oil production at the worst time, which is a slap in our face. So, but it's interesting, actually talk a little bit about because we were mentioning before we went on air about the whole situation on Ukraine. Because I think this is going to be really interesting. I was just reading how Ukraine has lost about almost half of their population. And there are some of the soldiers that are fighting now are even like late 40s, early 50s, and they don't have the manpower reserve. And again, this is a war where both countries are losing. So we think we may have some developments on that front, right?
Well, just this week, earlier this week, I'm like, it's been really quiet about Russia and Ukraine. I mean, there's obviously been the corruption issues with Ukraine, which if a lot of our American citizens have been mad about for a long time because a lot of that's our money. However, and this is something that the president has felt like he has not been able to solve. Obviously, it was what he was supposed to solve, what he thought the first thing he was supposed to solve. I think there was a lesson learned that you don't negotiate in public because he had the in public embarrassment really with Alaska. And so none of these big public events have really been able to do anything. And so when I started seeing late last night, this morning about a potential, it's being leaked a bit by bit that there's this potential deal that the US has a framework with Russia over how to end the war. And that I mean, I am a believer that the president and any president does not want to send or does not want to watch people die when they think that they could stop it. And I believe that President Trump, obviously President Zelensky, care about the amount of people that are dying in his country.
And Trump does hate war, to his credit. He really
No,
does.
that's what I mean. Like, I really do believe he would like this to stop, and I just think that the longer this goes on, right or wrong, Zelensky and the corruption stuff this week has not been helping, and I think that he's just losing less. A lot of the land that Russia took back, I don't know if he ever gets it back, and so it'll be interesting. I don't think he gets it back actually. So I see Russia, US, maybe if this is true that they do strike this deal and then sell it to Ukraine. And from what I understand, there's other European countries. It's not just US and Russia. There's others involved in these kind of secret talks, negotiations. Um, but I think US and Russia are obviously the big two.
Well, to me, what's going to be really interesting is less than the land. But if I were Zelensky, I would be more concerned about the security guarantees. If I were he, I'd say, you know what? I will give you, particularly some of the Donbass region, which is Russian speaking anyway. But we need almost like a NATO Article 5 type security guarantee where there's a red line. Russia cannot cross that line.
Yeah, but
I
Russia
think
has said
that
from the
is a deal
beginning,
Putin might
if
be
they
able.
put troops on the border, he will never go for it. But I guess that's troops. Maybe we could do drones and everything else. I mean, I think we're past the troop era anyway. So, Kurt, what are you thinking?
I mean, if at the end of the day, the result here is Putin gets what he wanted. He wanted more territory, and he got it, and he just waited everybody out, and eventually got it. I worry about what that means long term for the future. Um, at some point, we all got to have an international consensus that we're not going to let stuff like that happen, and then reward the aggressors behind it. Uh, you know, Zelensky and the people of Ukraine did nothing to invite this attack on them other than just existing. And I think that's important contextually for everyone to remember. It takes two people to agree to peace, but let's be clear about who broke it in the first place. And if the message that is sent is, from the leader of the free world, like, well, you started this and the bloodshed is your fault, but we're going to give you the land anyway. And and basically tell Ukraine, you know what, you're in a weakened posture right now, so you just have to take it. I think that sets a terrible precedent for the future, and we lose so much just moral authority to have jurisdiction over any other issues. When it comes to these type of conflicts, and I think that one way or another, whether it's in 3 years, 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, we'll be right back dealing with the same thing at some point because we have now legitimized warfare and land grabs in the 21st century.
Well, I think it's a cost benefit. I think if Putin gets, I'm not saying all the Donbass, but certainly some land where he just needs to be able to go back to his people and save face and say this 4-year campaign where, a million of our citizens died wasn't for a total waste. And I think if you can, the key is that can they do that and then have the security guarantees that mean in 3 or 5 years that this won't happen. That'll be the key thing. But I think we're going to have to leave it there. But great conversation as always with my comrades. And I thank all of you for joining us on Practically Political. We always appreciate having you with us. And until next time, I'm Dave Spencer, along with my partners in crime.